He was the unofficial ambassador of his idyllic hometown.
He was like a big teddy bear. The city loved him.
Everybody knew him. The police force, doctors, everybody.
She was his first lady and the love of his life.
She was a really nice person, a caring person.
They were a match made in small-town heaven. Until one fall afternoon when hell rained down on their lives.
Never saw this coming.
It was just chaos, people running around crying.
When police pulled back the curtains on this crime, no one could believe what skeletons lay lurking in the closet of this seemingly perfect couple.
These letters, they told the whole story.
It took the breath out of me.
She and him was gonna start porno films.
They would pick a time to meet up, basically for sexual reasons.
The devil works very fast. It's crazy, and you just don't understand it half of the time.
October 3rd, 2012. It's a brisk fall afternoon in Peekskill, New York, a small community nestled on the banks of the Hudson River.
While we refer to ourselves as a city, we're more of a small town.
It is a tight-knit community. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody says good morning.
At just past 2 p.m., postal worker Shirley Hewitt is finishing up her rounds when she turns onto a street on the outskirts of town.
It was like a daily routine.
Pine Street is a typical block in any city. Single-family houses, front yards, backyard, small driveways, well-kept houses, quiet.
She observes a silver Mercury Grand Marquis, and the vehicle's actually parked on the wrong side of the street.
As Shirley passes the vehicle, she realizes it's not empty.
She observes this male slumped over in the driver's seat.
Sir, are you okay?
The man is motionless and doesn't appear to be breathing.
69, what's your emergency?
There's a man on the street. He's in his car. He looked like he probably had a heart attack.
Within minutes, responding officer Elizabeth Fulch arrives at the scene.
Ma'am, did you call this in?
She immediately recognizes the man behind the wheel, local taxi driver Terry Camper.
Terry?
I start calling his name and reaching through the window to touch him.
Terry's a large man, hard to miss. As far as in the community, very well respected, very well liked.
I check for vital signs. When I go to reach to his neck on the left side, I touch him, he's still warm.
As she searches for a pulse, Officer Fulch feels a wet, sticky substance between her fingers.
I have blood in my hand.
Oh, God.
He had been shot in the back of the head.
There was 2 shots in the head, but they said the second shot was not even needed because the first shot was the deadly shot.
Terry Camper was born in 1959, the youngest of 8 children.
They're a good family, and nothing they would do for you.
Terry was a big guy with an even bigger heart.
His personality was just contagious. He loved people.
He had a lot of character, you know. He was just like everybody else, you know, he'll laugh and joke with you.
He was a really good guy to everybody, not just the family.
After graduating from Peekskill High, Terry landed a job in the local Veterans Affairs office. And though the work was steady, Terry dreamed of bigger things.
He wanted to be his own boss.
In his early 20s, Terry found a career that allowed him to operate independently and perfectly suited his friendly demeanor.
He wanted to be in his own business, so he started taxi business.
He loved to talk. You know, he'll bring up anything.
Hey, how are you? Hey, fellas, how are you?
He became really popular because of his business, and everybody knew him. The police force, doctors, everybody just knew him. Kids in school, they all know him. He was just well known around the town for everybody.
He was good at it. Everybody loved him.
He never drank, smoked, used drugs. He was a pretty good guy. He might tell a lie or two every once in a while to me. But he was, in all, he was a good guy.
Over the years, Terry's business grew steadily. Soon, he had added a van and a limo to his fleet of taxis. And with the proceeds from his cab company, Terry made another smart investment.
He had a little deli. The deli did good.
With a booming business and a winning personality, Terry fared pretty well with the opposite sex.
To the airport?
Yes.
Where you flying to?
Chicago.
Chicago?
In the evening time, we get dressed up, go out to party and chase the girls and dance and everything.
Terry Lee was a huge man. We used to say he was like a big teddy bear.
Love you.
That's fine.
It'll be fun. We'll have fun.
And the women love big teddy bears. You know, and he's a nice guy, good looking.
He certainly had that kind of a personality that could be very beguiling.
Terry, my uncle, yeah, he had the ladies, I tell you that. He was a ladies' man.
Terry didn't seem interested in settling down with just one woman. That was until 2001, when the 43-year-old cabbie picked up the fare that would change his life.
Yes, please.
A lovely single mother named Beatrice.
What kind of work do you do? Wait, don't tell me. You must be a model.
No, I'm a sales clerk, but that wasn't a bad line.
7 years Terry's senior, Beatrice was immediately taken in by his youthful charisma and joie de vivre.
Why don't you let me take you out?
Are you asking me out on a date?
That could be a possibility, right?
That's how they met. And then after that, it just snowballed. They started going out and talking to each other.
Though Terry was juggling several lady friends when they met, after that first date, he and Beatrice became inseparable.
When he was driving taxi, she would sit up there in the front seat with him. And, you know, he'd drive and drive, take her with him on the different runs.
And as far as Terry was concerned, nothing was too good for his #1 passenger.
He truly loved Bea. He really did. He tried to do anything he could for her, buying her stuff or doing things, whatever he had to do for her, he did it.
As for Beatrice, she loved how Terry embraced her children as his own.
Look, y'all been good in school?
Yes, sir.
He's taking care of the kids. What more could you ask for? He loved children. He just was happy when he was with them and everything.
She described him as her soulmate.
In 2002, Terry and Beatrice were married in a small, intimate ceremony.
They were married in Highland Falls at the firehouse.
Everybody had a great time.
Settling into a high-rise apartment in Westchester County, it seemed married life brought out the best in both of them.
Hey, B.
Hey, baby.
How are you doing?
I am great.
He was definitely what you call a family-orientated person. He loved his family.
That's something for you.
You do.
Terry Lee would always provide. He was good to her that way.
Just for you.
Oh, you are too good to me.
In turn, Beatrice treated Terry like the king of the castle.
B took care of everything. He didn't have to do nothing in the house.
10 years in, it seemed the couple's bond was as strong as the day they first tied the knot.
Well, it was a good marriage. They was happy.
But on October 3rd, 2012, Beatrice and Terry's happy life took a tragic turn.
Initially, it was looked at as if it may be a natural death, but upon closer inspection, saw that Mr. Camper had in fact been shot in the back of the head.
Terry is rushed to the emergency room of a nearby hospital, but there's little the doctors can do to save him.
Mr. Camper was pronounced at approximately 3:02, 3:15.
We had a homicide on our hands.
What do we got?
As detectives launch their investigation,
Terry Camper?
no one in Peekskill can believe such a beloved member of their community is gone.
What happened?
Anybody's death is terrible, but it does evoke, you know, an emotion when it's somebody that's a good person in the community.
For officers of the Peekskill PD, this crime feels personal. Finding Terry's killer isn't just a job, it's a mission.
We want to get this guy. We want to find out who did this. Somebody's got to pay for this.
It seems everyone in the tight-knit community of Peekskill, New York knew and loved big-hearted taxi driver Terry Camper. And Terry loved them right back.
He always had a smile on his face, and if he could do something for you, he would.
But there's no one in Peekskill who meant more to Terry than his beloved wife, Beatrice.
Terry Lee loved B very much. He loved her unconditionally.
But on October 3rd, 2012, Beatrice and Terry's life together came to a brutal end when Terry was found dead in the driver's seat of his taxi.
I think they were shocked more than anything because he was such a well-liked guy. People wanted answers.
It was just very, very sad to know that he was no longer going to be around to say the normal good morning, hey, how are you? Have a good day.
As patrol officers cordon off the scene on Pine Street, detectives search for clues inside Terry's taxi.
The vehicle looked well kept. There was no blood everywhere. It was clean, and just a couple of rounds in the back seat.
The casings that were located in the rear of the individual's vehicle were from a small caliber weapon. Anytime there's a crime such as this with a homicide involving a taxi or livery driver, your first thing you're thinking of is a robbery.
Cab drivers inherently run the risk of picking someone up that could victimize them.
It's a cash business. Around here, they don't take credit cards. It's cash in hand, pay up front, and they keep cash on them. So that's the first thing that you think. We have a robbery here.
Come on, give me your money. Come on, come on, come on.
That was my assumption, that he was there dropping off somebody and they robbed him. He perhaps didn't comply and they killed him.
But when detectives take a closer look at Terry's personal effects, the robbery theory doesn't hold water.
His car keys were missing, his cell phone was missing.
There's a wallet. There are credit cards and cash still inside.
His wallet was on his person, and although robberies do result in homicides, most of the time that is due to a struggle, and we didn't have that here.
It appears that this suspect, got into the rear of the cab and immediately fired a round into the back of the head.
But if robbery wasn't the motive behind Terry's murder, what was?
We did theorize that he was shot as a hit. And that brings up a host of other reasons why. Was he into gambling? Did he owe somebody money? Was he into something we weren't aware of? And was this person following up a vendetta?
We don't want to paint ourselves into any type of corner. We need to really go in there with open mind.
With more questions than answers, police fan out across the neighborhood in search of possible eyewitnesses. But the demographics of the area pose their own set of obstacles.
This is actually a very good residential neighborhood, and most of the people aren't home. Most people are at work.
It's quiet. Usually during the day, people are at work. There's few people around. There are no businesses.
We definitely believe that this location was picked by the suspect. It was definitely the opportune place to commit this crime.
Still searching for a lead, detectives head to Hudson Valley Hospital, where a throng of Terry's loved ones have gathered to mourn his passing.
Mrs. Camper, I'm Detective Johansson.
Peekskill being the small community that it is, word traveled faster than any 4G network out there.
There's just chaos, people running around crying.
I found out he was shot in the back of the head, and I just broke down. My mom broke down.
So we were playing a double role, consoling the family, as well as gathering evidence.
No one is more inconsolable than Terry's widow, Beatrice.
She was crying, visibly shaking. You could tell she had gotten to the hospital in a hurry because her clothing was disheveled, and she was so upset about what had happened.
Though Beatrice is overcome with grief, she agrees to speak with police.
Can you think of anyone who might have wanted to hurt Terry?
No, sir.
Is there any possibility that Terry was involved in any illegal activity?
Terry, no. He was a hard-working, honest man.
This is all routine, but can you tell me where you were this afternoon?
I was at my apartment. We're having our apartment repainted.
How was your marriage?
Terry was the love of my life.
She was in mourning, in shock.
Well, we're going to do everything we can to find your husband's killer.
Thank you, sir.
After wrapping up their interview with Beatrice, officers confirm her alibi. With Beatrice now cleared, police turn their attention to Terry's friends and family.
Since Terry was so well-liked, nobody came up and said they had any enemies.
There was no reason why anybody, we thought, would want Mr. Camper dead.
Terry's family can't think of a reason anyone would want to murder him, but one of his relatives provides police with a lead.
Ruth Smith. Sometimes she's seen riding in his cab with him.
Okay, Ruth Smith.
Ruth was a good friend of Mr. Camper's.
She often goes and keeps Terry company while he is working as a taxi driver.
Are Terry and Ruth more than just friends?
There was a potential witness, someone who had been with Mr. Camper most of the day. We learned that this was a companion of Mr. Camper, someone who spent a lot of time with him. We were looking at this as if it was deeper.
It was a strange relationship that Terry and Ruth had. It seemed that Terry often spent more time with Ruth than he did with his own wife.
That afternoon, police contact Ruth and ask her a few questions.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for coming down. Appreciate it.
So you were with Terry Camper this afternoon?
Yes, I was. It was about 1 where he picked me up to drop me off for work.
So he dropped me off at work, and he says, I love you, I says, I love you too. Be safe.
Ruth explains that her and Terry's love for each other was purely platonic.
Terry was a very good friend. We was always there for each other.
Ruth appears to be telling the truth, and by all accounts has no ill will toward Terry. But she does give police a potential new lead.
He did get a call from a guy regarding a fare. Camper's cab.
Around 1:15, she received a call from someone to be picked up at 118 Pine Street.
Mr. Camper asked her to pick up the call, which she did.
The person wanted him there right then.
There's a guy want to be picked up at 100 block of Pine.
Fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be 20 minutes before I can even get back over there. Look, I've got to get you to work. Tell him to call somebody else.
So Terry says, tell him 20 minutes or call somebody else.
Okay. He said he'll wait.
So wait.
So he says, I'll wait for him. So that's when he took me to work and he went up the hill to pick up the person.
It's the very same block where Terry's body had been found. Officers ask Ruth if she can remember anything else about the male caller.
Only thing I noticed is that he did call from an 845 area code.
She recalled the area code that the telephone number had come from, being that it popped up on Mr. Camper's caller ID.
845 area code.
Yes.
Now you're sure about that?
Yes.
For detectives, it's a promising lead. But as they know, they still need to connect a name to the number.
We needed to find who was the person that had summoned Mr. Camper to the 100 block of Pine Street.
We have to get this guy immediately. That becomes primary to everything else that we're doing. That becomes critical.
Around Peekskill, New York, no one was more beloved than gregarious local taxi driver Terry Camper. So on October 3rd, 2012, when Terry is found dead in his cab, investigators are baffled.
We ask ourselves and ask one another on the scene, was there something deeper that we needed to look into? Was there something in Mr. Camper's past that we needed to look into? And all those questions and thoughts rapidly hit a dead end. There was nothing.
He's a jovial guy, a happy guy, had a lot of friends, and when this happened, people were at a loss.
But after speaking with Terry's close friend, Ruth Smith, detectives have their first solid lead.
She had been with Mr. Camper throughout most of the day.
Camper's cab.
She actually took the telephone call from the fair on Pine Street, where he ultimately died.
He said he'll wait.
Other numbers, she recognized an area code that was not from around here.
Based on Ruth's statement, detectives are confident they can identify Terry's killer based on the 845 phone call made to Terry's cell phone. There's just one problem. Terry's cell phone isn't in his vehicle.
It was gone. We could not find it. And we knew we had it because we knew that he was called to Pine Street. We needed to find that phone.
In an effort to locate Terry's cell phone, investigators ask his service provider for help.
It was signaling that it was 25, 30 miles away.
They actually were able to locate the general area of the phone, which happened to be in the area of Route 9W and 218.
Officers race to the intersection of Route 9 West and Highway 218, hoping to find both the phone and Terry's killer. But when they arrive, there's no sign of the killer. But they are able to locate his phone.
We found his phone on the side of the road. There it was, still on, pinging away.
Finding that phone was a big piece of evidence for us.
Once we found the phone, we realized that our killer had left the scene and traveled north.
Back at the station, detectives began looking through the phone's call log.
We looked at all phone calls that came in to Mr. Camper's phone.
It looks like that Terry did receive a call from an 845 area code, just like Ruth Smith said.
But when detectives try to track down the phone's owner, they hit a snag.
It was a Boost phone that was registered to no one in particular.
Unlisted?
The last phone call went to an unlisted person.
That leaves detectives with only one option.
Well, let's just go down the list and call all the numbers and see what we can find out.
And they reached out to every one of them.
Wanted to see if you recognize this number, 845-555-4159.
As they near the bottom of the call list, detectives still haven't identified the mystery caller. That is, until they speak to one of the last numbers on the list, a friend of Terry's named Sandra Dolman.
We asked her if she knew of any of the telephone numbers that we had, and in particular, the one from the killer. She did recognize that number. She knew that it came from a man named John who lived in Newburgh.
John? Do you have a last name?
Miss Sandra Dolman was able to confirm that number to be John Murray's phone number. Yeah, Sandra Dolman and John, they're friends. I think they've been friends for a long time. I believe they just got on a cruise recently together with their spouses.
According to Sandra, John's full name is John Murray.
Our initial reaction is, all right, great, we've got a name.
But who is John Murray, and what is his connection to Terry Camper? When detectives run a background check on Murray, they're shocked by what they find.
We found that John Murray was a convicted killer. He had killed 2 people, one in a robbery. He was someone who had killed before.
He was in jail for 20, 30 years.
He's on parole. He lives in Newburgh, New York.
Now, as you might imagine, we're excited. We're on to something.
That evening, detectives make the 30-minute drive north to Newburgh, New York.
We met with Newburgh PD, informed them of the crime that had taken place earlier in Peekskill, and that we were looking at Mr. Murray as our prime suspect, and went over to Mr. Murray's residence.
They arrived shortly after midnight.
He was in good shape. He was stocky.
What y'all doing here? We're with the Peekskill Police Department.
He had a hardened look to him. He spoke, kind of gruff at us. It was around 12:15, 12:30 a.m. in the morning.
Look, man, I'm on parole.
We think that you may be able to help us. We'd like you to come down to the station and answer a few questions.
He did agree to voluntarily come down to the Newburgh PD and to speak with us.
Back at the Newburgh station, detectives asked John Murray where he was at the time Terry Camper was murdered.
His position is he took his grandbaby to school, and then he ran some errands, including stopping at a bank. He came home and had lunch around 3 o'clock.
So, you've not been anywhere near Peekskill today?
Nope.
Do you know a man named Terry Camper?
Nope.
This guy was first in the criminal justice system. He was guarded, forthcoming with some information.
He was stoic. That's the only way I can describe him. I mean, he had that, 1,000-yard stare, straight ahead, right through you.
Well, you see, I got a problem with that story, Mr. Murray. A cabbie named Terry Camper was murdered today in Peekskill. The last number to come up on his cell phone is from you.
I don't know no Terry Camper, and I wasn't in Peekskill today.
When we got closer and the questions became more probative and more specific, he's more reticent and less cooperative till the point he just shuts down.
He requested an attorney, so that interview was over.
Despite their suspicions, detectives decide not to press John Murray any further, at least for now.
You still have to be very circumspect. Sometimes people are arrested and it turns out they didn't commit the crime.
Detectives are convinced John Murray is withholding information. But without any concrete evidence, they have no choice but to release him. But just as detectives bid their new suspect goodnight, new evidence rolls in, courtesy of Fishkill State Prison.
This was yet another one of these shocking revelations.
It was like it took the breath out of me. I was shocked.
Less than 24 hours after the execution-style murder of 53-year-old Terry Camper, detectives have honed in on a person of interest, a 60-year-old ex-con named John Murray.
John Murray is a cold-blooded killer.
He's definitely capable of committing a crime like this. So at this point, we're setting our sights on John Murray.
But what detectives don't have yet is hard evidence linking John Murray to Terry's murder, nor have they pinpointed any potential motive.
This isn't a robbery. there was something else going on here.
Desperate for answers, the following day police turned back to the one person who knew Terry better than anyone, his wife, Beatrice.
We had been speaking to her all along, trying to pick her brain, ask her what could have happened. We felt that maybe she could provide us with information.
I'm sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Camper, but I'd like you to take a look at this photo. Does this man look familiar to you? We think he may be involved with your husband's death.
No, not at all.
His name is John Murray. Does that ring any bells?
No. Sorry.
For detectives, it's a frustrating setback, but maybe there's another way to catch a killer.
We were on the verge of uncovering what had happened here.
So they try to gather more evidence to build a case against him. They begin with what they know about the killer's escape.
Once we found the phone, we realized that our killer had left the scene and traveled north, up Route 9.
Looking at a map of the area, detectives realize that the Hudson River forms a natural barrier due west of Peekskill. They also know that Terry's phone was found near the intersection of Route 9 West and Highway 218, which means the killer most likely crossed the Hudson River at one location, the Bear Mountain Bridge.
Somebody says, hey, we could check the cameras over at Bear Mountain. We made contact with the park police at Bear Mountain.
We gave them the make and model of Mr. Murray's vehicle, and we asked them for assistance in using their cameras over the Bear Mountain Bridge between the hours of 12 p.m. and 3 p.m.
Within minutes, investigators identified John Murray's vehicle on the Bear Mountain Bridge surveillance cameras.
We were able to locate that vehicle crossing the Bear Mountain Bridge at approximately 1 p.m. on October 3rd, heading toward Peekskill, and then at approximately 2 p.m. crossing back over the bridge in the direction of Newburgh.
We believe John Murray drove to and from the crime scene, coming over the bridge, allowing time for the crime to be committed, and then traveling back home in the opposite direction.
They were able to put him in the city of Peekskill in that period, which was right around the time when the shooting took place.
He tried to give us an alibi that he was up there in Newburgh, but we had the facts on our side. We knew now we were very close. We had to now put all of these pieces together.
The surveillance cameras on the Bear Mountain Bridge placed John Murray in Peekskill at the time of the murder. But one big piece of the puzzle is still missing.
This time, the motive was unclear as to why Mr. Camper was killed.
Detectives head north to Fishkill State Prison, where Murray had served more than 20 years for murder, hoping to find some connection to Terry Camper.
Looks like his wife visited him a couple times.
Anybody else?
Well, I'll be damned. Beatrice.
In the visitor records, we found that Beatrice was a visitor of his.
According to the prison's visitor log, Beatrice Camper paid John Murray a visit just months before her husband's murder.
She had visited him there, and he had made phone calls to her from the prison to her phone.
She had made like 900 phone calls to him while he was in jail. And that's where a lot of Terry money was going. She was sending money to him.
Police initially just thought of her as a grieving widow. She played the role apparently very well.
We begin to ask ourselves, why does Beatrice not want us to know about her relationship with John Murray? It appeared as if now somebody's trying to hide something.
But before detectives can question Beatrice Camper about her relationship with John Murray, another bizarre development will rock the investigation.
Detective McGann finds a box with love letters.
These letters, they told the whole story.
Love is a powerful emotion. Once we get into a relationship, then all of our negative qualities seem to be enhanced and come to light.
When convicted killer John Murray was first identified as a suspect in Terry Camper's murder, Terry's grieving widow Beatrice claimed she didn't know him. But after paying a visit to Fishkill Prison, where John was incarcerated for more than 20 years, detectives realized Beatrice was lying.
She was untruthful. She initially told us she didn't know John Murray, but we knew otherwise. Beatrice was a visitor when John Murray was in prison. We found phone records from the jail. She put money on his books. We, at this point, wanted to dig deeper into Beatrice's potential involvement.
On October 5th, investigators knock on Beatrice's apartment door. When she greets officers, it seems she is well on her way to putting Terry's death behind her.
When the police come to her house, she's sitting there drinking wine, smoking cigarettes, listening to music.
Hello, Mrs. Camper. We're here to search your apartment. I need you to take a seat for me.
Upon getting to the apartment, me and my partner enter the bedroom, and immediately we observe Beatrice and Terry's marriage certificate on the dresser.
But it's what is lying next to that marriage certificate that stops investigators dead in their tracks.
Alongside that, there's 2 life insurance policies. In total, we're around $200,000.
Yeah, she didn't waste any time.
And at that point, we kind of looked at each other like, wow, she's involved in this. It's understandable when a spouse dies tragically. These policies are in place, but within a day or 2 of your spouse being killed, the mindset to have that paperwork out, ready to go, that was, definitely put up a big red flag for us.
Inside her closet, investigators find more evidence linking Beatrice to the crime.
We came across a shoebox. Inside that box, there was numerous letters from Mr. Murray while he was incarcerated at a physical correctional facility.
These letters were intimate correspondence between John and Beatrice.
The contents of which are more scintillating than the tawdriest romance novel.
And with each other, 2 very emotional, deep emotional connections that they apparently share.
They had an interesting relationship in that Beatrice and John knew each other a number of years. At one point, they lost touch, and many years later, they reconnected, and Beatrice and John started to write each other letters, and their relationship grew.
When he was released in 2011, it blossomed into a full-blown love affair.
A definite good piece of evidence proving the relationship between Beatrice and John.
The fact that she kept those letters doesn't surprise me. When it's the matters of the heart, people don't think as rationally as they normally would under other circumstances.
They would meet up at Beatrice's apartment for, sexual reasons.
But Beatrice's correspondence with John Murray reveals the couple had big plans once he was out on parole.
Their plan was, when he got out of prison, was to eventually leave his wife. She was going to leave her husband, and they were going to be together.
And as far as I can understand, she and him was going to start porno films. I don't know what she'd be at 60 years old. I don't know what she'd be doing on there.
She was no longer attracted to Terry, and that had been replaced with her attraction to John Murray. These letters ultimately laid out what their plans were, and that was to take out an insurance policy and plans on collecting that insurance policy criminally. Whether it was love, whether it was lust, I can't answer that, but it was certainly more than friendship, and it was enough to kill Terry Camper. We conferred with the district attorney and decided that we had probable cause to arrest both Beatrice Camper and John Murray.
Armed with the life insurance policies, the call logs from the prison, the video from Bear Mountain Bridge, and the steamy love letters between the 2 suspects, police formally charged Beatrice Camper and John Murray with the murder of Terry Camper.
I was shocked. I didn't believe it. I was like, are you sure?
And I just couldn't believe it, that she could do something like that.
I was hurt. I was mad. I had answers, questions that I knew I wasn't gonna get answers for. Why? And I'm still the same. Why? Because it was uncalled for. It was a selfish, uncalled for. If you don't love a person, you leave them. Simple.
It seems the case between Beatrice and John is open and shut. But as prosecutors prepare for trial, they worry how the jury will react to the largely circumstantial evidence.
There was no DNA evidence. There was no fingerprints linking a specific person to the crime.
Unfortunately, no weapon was ever recovered.
What it was all circumstantial evidence.
The last thing prosecutors want to see is the violent ex-con walk.
If he would have walked free from this one, he probably would have killed again.
Just months before the trial, Westchester County prosecutors make a hard choice. They offer Beatrice Camper 15 years to life in exchange for her testimony against her lover, John Murray.
The DA's office has to make their case as solid as possible. She was, metaphorically, the lesser of 2 evils.
But will Beatrice accept the DA's offer?
We didn't know if the door was open for the plea deal.
You don't know what's going to happen.
In Westchester County, New York, Beatrice Camper has been charged with the murder of her husband, Terry Camper. A few months before the trial, prosecutors offer Beatrice 15 years to life in exchange for her testimony against alleged triggerman, John Murray.
I don't think she had a right to a plea bargain. But I mean, that's the way the law is. She had to testify against him.
She agreed to testify against Mr. Murray.
The guilt was just too much, and she broke down and basically laid it out on the table that this was planned by her and John.
But even with Beatrice in their back pocket, prosecutors know a conviction against John Murray is no foregone conclusion, especially if it comes to a showdown between two star-crossed lovers.
We all have emotions that overcome us at times. When you have emotions that sinister, anything could have happened.
In April of 2014, 62-year-old John Murray is led into a New York State courthouse to stand trial for the murder of Terry Camper. Prosecutors allege Murray conspired with his lover Beatrice to kill her husband and collect $200,000 in insurance money in order to start their life together and potentially start shooting porn together.
Once Terry was killed, they were going to cash in the life insurance policies, and her and John were going to, leave the area.
She is having an affair with a convicted criminal, and then you choose to set up a murder of your husband to be with a convicted criminal. For them to do that to him, it was horrible. Tara Lee did deserve to go that way.
I was shocked. If she wanted to be with him, then she should have left Tara Lee.
Prosecutors assert that on October 3rd, 2012, Beatrice Camper and John Murray put their plan in motion.
We believe the suspect called to be picked up in front of 118 Pine, which is where Mr. Camper's vehicle was located.
He was there for the sole purpose of executing Mr. Camper.
Prosecutors say that since the two men had never met, Terry Camper had no reason to fear his wife's murderous lover.
So where are we going?
Nowhere.
Turned out to be 2 shots to the back of the head. He never saw this coming.
Mr. Murray shot Mr. Camper and then fled from the vehicle.
To support their argument, prosecutors submit Terry Camper's cell phone records and the surveillance footage from Bear Mountain Bridge.
That's how they were able to put him in Peekskill during the time of the shooting.
After submitting the cell phone records and surveillance video into evidence, prosecutors called their star witness, Beatrice Camper, to the stand.
But she looked like she had aged tremendously throughout the process. And you could tell she was very anxious, contrary to Mr. Murray, who looked well put together and was giving directives to his team of lawyers. So you could tell that Mr. Murray was not new at this, at the criminal justice system.
When she got on the stand, it was hard. I mean, she was clearly broken up about what happened.
Once under oath, Beatrice tells the court how she fell under John Murray's spell years earlier in New York City.
They knew each other originally from Queens. They had a long relationship that was on again, off again.
Beatrice tells the court that when John was sent to prison for 2 murders in 1978, she was devastated. But even though John was behind bars, he was never far from her heart, even after she married Terry Camper.
And looking at the letters, you had the sense that these two were definitely in love.
Beatrice testifies that it was because of her undying love for John that she agreed to do the unthinkable.
She said that it was all his idea, and to buy the insurance policies, to kill Terry so they could go off together and live off of his insurance money.
The district attorney had Beatrice say that John was the mastermind of all this. Like, she was just a pawn in his plan.
When it's the matters of the heart, people don't think as rationally as they normally would under other circumstances.
To support Beatrice's testimony, prosecutors play the couple's recorded phone calls from Fishkill Prison.
There was a phone call where he tells her, I'm gonna deal with Terry when I get out. But he specifically tells her, hey, listen, you don't have enough money in his life insurance account. I want you today to go and, increase the amount. And that was a very big phone call.
Beatrice claims that even though she was in on every step of the murder plot, the moment the deed was done, she began having second thoughts.
Allegedly, he just called her on that day and said, I'm in Peekskill, and then he called her back and said, it's done.
She was so upset. She was crying. You could see that she was regretting what had happened.
But when it's the defense's turn, they claim Beatrice, not John Murray, was the crime's real mastermind. And it was Beatrice who stood to gain the most from her husband's death.
She was the one who brought this to John. She wanted her husband dead because she wanted the life insurance money. Or she got John involved in this because she needed the police to think John did it.
She wanted to have this life with him, and she hated her husband. He wasn't ending his own relationship with Patricia soon enough, and so Beatrice was becoming upset. In fact, he said, we're done, you're bothering me too much.
They were looking to shoot holes in her story, point the fingers at her, and really to show that Mr. Murray has nothing to do with this.
John Murray's lawyers go so far as to suggest Beatrice, not their client, was the one who pulled the trigger.
The district attorney's office brought in these painters to say they were painting her apartment, and those painters hadn't seen her leave. The problem was the painters also admitted that at times they were in the bedroom, in the bathroom painting. She easily could have left the premises without them knowing that, and they admitted that.
John Murray's lawyers asked Beatrice about the phone that Mr. Murray supposedly used on the day of the crime.
She said on the witness stand that John Murray had returned that telephone to her a day prior to this murder. In other words, by her own testimony, she was in possession of the phone, not John Murray.
Before the defense rests their case, they poke holes in another key piece of the prosecution's circumstantial case. Though surveillance footage from the Bear Mountain Bridge seems to put Mr. Murray in Peekskill at the time of the murder, the defense suggests that someone other than the defendant could have driven that car.
They never were able to determine whose license plate it was. At no point were they able to show a photograph saying that John Murray was the driver of that car.
Even Beatrice herself could have been the driver. As for the prison calls, the defense has an explanation for those as well.
When he was saying, I'm going to take care of this guy, he meant, I'm going to make sure he's no longer in your life. By no means does that mean he was saying, I'm going to get out and murder him.
After calling Beatrice's testimony into question, the defense takes aim at the lack of physical evidence.
There was no gun, no fingerprints, no eyewitness, no DNA that linked him on this murder.
Even the district attorney knew that, and in all of these cumulatively and collectively, circumstantial evidence.
On April 16th, both sides rest their case. The next day, the jury returns with its verdict.
Mr. Murray was found guilty of murder.
The judge sentences John Murray to life in prison without parole.
The police department did a good job, and the court system did the job they're supposed to do.
He ain't coming out no more. He ain't never gonna see the light of day. I'm cool with him, but you know what? I wish the death penalty was here. Hell, I pulled a damn switch.
He should have never gotten out from the first time from another killing he done. Shows you how the system works. And Terry would have still been alive.
As for the woman at the center of this crime, many wonder if 15 years is too lenient a punishment.
She had to have input too, and it don't make her no less guilty, to me, in my eyesight. I feel like even though he pulled the trigger, she's just as much at blame and at fault too.
I think she should have been tried the same way he was tried. She has to do 15 years to life. His life is gone, so why should she be able to get out in 15 years? I don't think she should be given that option.
He knew everybody in the community, not just his family, but everyone in the community knew Tara Lee, loved Tara Lee, and they all miss him dearly.
You hear the term closure. Closure to me would be if Terry Camper was able to somehow be resurrected and return to his family, who obviously misses his company. The next best thing was justice.
How could you be so hateful? And how could you do something like this to somebody that cared so much for you? And I pray that God will have mercy on her soul.